We anticipated the year 2000 with much excitement. And the same thing happened here on Austin Faith Dialogue. So on this show, wrapping up the year 2000, we look at highlights of the shows. We talk about how we hope we've made a difference in your life and in the community of Austin. Stay with us for today's Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you're here for today's Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and what we're going to do, the guest and I, and you'll recognize him in just a minute, is take a look at the shows we've done on Austin Faith Dialogue this past year, the year 2000, look at some of the highlights and talk about why we've done what we've done. We're glad you joined us for the show, and we're glad you're here, Rich. Folks know you, Rich Thompson, as another one of the hosts of the show.
Thank you, Sandy, for allowing me to sit in this chair tonight.
It is different. Well, Rich, we have 3 clips of shows that you have done this year.
Right.
And I know the first one was perhaps a little bit of a stretch for you. It was about a holiday that was different. Not one that many of us in the English-speaking tradition know, but tell us why you did this show about the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos.
Well, Sandy, I did it because you suggested it some time back, and I just filed it away that when it came on the Sunday before Halloween, as it happened this year that was my turn to do a show, these folks I had an opportunity to meet down in Congress at the La Peña Arts Organization are very much leaders in the celebration that happens on the Day of the Dead, which is Halloween in the North American context, but coming out of long history in Central and South America. I learned from our guests that this has a tradition that even predates the coming of the Europeans. And I think that the clip that we have here are 2 guests, one from Cynthia Perez from La Peña, emphasizes how this has had artistic expression in the community. People who watched it then and will see a bit of it now will find it one of the most colorful sets, I think, that we've ever done on Austin Faith Dialogue.
A real highlight of the year. Well, let's take a look at the clip then from Day of the Dead.
All right. Take a look at, I think that these are different. I mean, this is kind of like what we have here.
These are some of the same things. This is the artwork of Lisa Hernandez. She's a contemporary artist, and she deals primarily with Day of the Dead. And in her ability to make these things, she's also giving the individual a chance to reflect on different, the fiddler player, the mariachi music. There's Frida Kahlo's little nicho where she has her date printed on top and some candles to her. She's got a mirror, which very interesting enough, as people go by there, look into the mirror, see their own death coming at them. So, because we're here only for a little time.
Yeah, I see.
And so they're playful in one nature, but on another nature they're very serious, and it's for us a way of accepting our own destinies.
Okay. Jose, as we have been looking at these, does this fit in with your Concheros way of celebrating?
It certainly does. We always make that distinction between the festivities, for example, of the community, where actually the community can have parades and dance, and it's a rejoicing. The ceremonial part, these same altars are set by the community. They're similar altars where you have the offerings, las ofrendas, where we have things that, there's things on the altar that actually go as far back as the origins of El Dia de los Muertos, 5,000 years before the Spaniards arrived.
Even before the Christians came on the scene.
Oh, certainly, certainly. For example, the Dia de los Muertos in the Aztec tradition occurred in the 14th month of the solar calendar, which was called Quecholi. And on this day, the community would go to the cemeteries and make offerings of tamales and offerings of food and other things to the warriors.
You're right. Very visually stimulating. What a fun show.
Yeah.
And you had wanted, Rich, to say something else about what your second guest was talking about in that clip.
Well, Jose Flores, who teaches at the Austin Community College, has a wonderful grasp of the history of this and how it is not just a ceremony for the public, but for those who are, especially in the Aztec tradition, this is something they spend all night doing. It's an expression of faith. And that one show accomplishes two of our four purposes on Austin Faith Dialogue. We do faith traditions, as we say, from the Buddhist to the Baptist. And we do the arts. And so both of those purposes are accomplished there. And the other two purposes will be evident in the other two clips that we'll be looking at.
And so the next one feeds right into that.
Right.
You took a look during the year at homelessness.
Right.
The problems, the solutions, the whole thorny issue of homelessness in your show called Beyond Homelessness.
Right.
Say a little something about the purpose, the focus, the background of that particular show.
Well, this is a show that is like the many that we do that has to do with social issues, as distinct from personal, pastoral kinds of issues that will come after this. The homeless guest, the one that spoke about that, Gerald Campbell, who has been the senior advisor to the Commissioner of Health of the state of Texas, was in government in D.C. before coming here. But he left that, and before coming here, spent 8 years on the streets in Washington, D.C., taking photographs of homeless people. And his reason for doing that was to relate to them individually and personally and say that the way to go beyond homelessness is not just government programs, but a spiritual, personal connection.
So let's take a look at that clip and see the passion that I'm sure he brings to the subject.
Well, I won't mention his name, but he's a person that I got to know, and I've known for about 10 years now. And at one point in his life, he was a heroin addict and ran the streets. But in this image, you see, once again, you see the dialectic of love and alienation. On the one side, you see the dark with the eye. That's the brutalization, that's the dark side, that's the alienation. And yet on the other side, if you can just sort of visualize half of the image, you see this warmness, this reaching out, this crying out for love. And I think that that's what people are looking for more in their lives than anything else, is the love that makes them to be complete, because without others we can't be complete.
Do you recall how this particular individual became homeless?
No, I don't. No.
Did you see a pattern in the people that you worked with? What were the conditions that led them to be on the streets?
Well, it's a strange thing, because there's a lot of people out there. Of course, they don't have houses. Although a lot of people can go to a place, they can go back with their family if they want to. There's drugs out there. There's a lot of joblessness, although a lot of homeless people work part-time and they still stay on the street. But what in talking with them, what I began to see was that there was a kind of disconnectedness at the most basic level, and they felt like they didn't belong. And I began to realize that more than anything else, it was this unmet need to belong that in a way drove them, because the need was there whether they were treated right or not.
I see.
And so if they didn't find a way to belong in their family or in their schools or elsewhere, they would gravitate towards where they felt comfortable, where they felt like they belonged. And it could be the street.
And did you find a sense of community that had developed among folks there?
There's definitely a sense of community out there. Yeah.
And did they include you in?
They did, and as a matter of fact, I'm still alive. And
I imagine you find, as I do sometimes, that a half an hour is just too short. So talk about then your third clip, It's a show on sexual abuse in the church.
Right. And it's an interesting little transition here, because what Campbell was pointing out is that many of the people who are on the streets come out of abusive homes. And the last clip is about particularly abuse in the church, which is a very touchy issue, as you know. And our guest, Kathy Reed, has written books on this, and is a Mennonite minister here in town. And I look forward to seeing this again myself.
Okay, let's take a look at the clip then.
A minute or two here, but how do you help bring about healing for those who have been abused, where the prevention is too late?
Well, you know, I think that that's what I've been amazed at is how many people in our congregations are survivors of some kind of abuse. And I think it's more than just what the statistics would tell us. When the statistics tell us 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, 1 out of 7, whatever it is with boys and girls, I think that people who have been abused suffer greatly, and it raises deeply spiritual questions. How did God allow this to happen to me? If I trust God, is that like trusting the person who abused me? If I can't trust my father or my minister or my Boy Scout leader or whoever, how can I ever trust God? You know, those kinds of really deep spiritual questions, so that you find a lot of survivors, either they shun the church completely because the church is another institution of our society that has perpetuated the cover-up, or they're in church because they have a hunger and a need to figure out those answers.
Okay, well, as you saw that, Sandy, I think you can tell that not only does Kathy speak with conviction about this, but she's very knowledgeable about it. And I found that there had been a series of sexual abuse incidents in churches in Austin the preceding year, and it got a good bit of publicity in the paper. But then you begin to discover that for every incident that does get publicized, there are many more that never make the headlines. And so her point is that every church needs to be really upfront about this, and not just the ministers, but people that work with youth or Sunday school teachers. Or it's incumbent, in fact, upon the leadership of the church to say this happens everywhere, and you're not exempt from it just because you happen to have religious symbols in front of your building.
Along that line, the United Methodist churches in this part of Texas are required now to have in place a written sexual abuse policy covering all their workers in the local church. Even folks who've been around for years and years still need to be covered by the policy. I wonder then if you had any reaction to this particular show, or if Kathy Reed did. Do you know if
I didn't talk to her afterwards about it, but I think that the fact that it is so touchy, it's so controversial, it's even more valuable when it's like that. And I felt really good about being able to include her in that topic.
So out of all the shows that you did this year, you chose these 3.
These 3, right. And it gives that pastoral touch, that personal issues. It's not just social issues, it's not just the arts, it's not just faith traditions, but those things that are very close to home.
And we do try to strike a balance with that, I know, although it's hard.
Right.
Well, thanks for the look at your clips. We'll look at some others when we come back, and we hope you'll stay with us for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be right back. glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue when we're doing our year-ender show, taking a look at the shows we particularly liked. We hope you did too. And the guest and other host is Rich Thompson. So, Rich, it's your turn to ask me some questions.
Okay, good. Well, Sandy, I think that as I looked at the shows that you did this year and the clips that you've chosen, I mean, you could have chosen others, but these particular ones, just give us a little sense of what they are and why you did both have them originally and want to look at them again.
I did these two. I chose these two because one show had one guest, a very lively person. The other show was more focused on the arts. I was trying to show a diversity in the programming. And so the first show I picked was one that focused on the work of Texas Impact. Now, we originally aired the show at right before the presidential election. Of course, who knew it was going to take as long as it did?
Right.
And what I was trying to have the guest talk to us about was the fact that involvement in the political arena is not something that should happen just every 4 years or every time that there's an election, but rather should be an ongoing part of the commitment of a person of faith.
Okay, and who is your guest on this?
My guest is the executive director of Texas Impact. She could hardly sit in her chair. So
okay.
Let's take a look, I guess.
We can hardly wait. Let's take a look.
The reality is the political process is happening all the time. And you know, there's the phenomenon of election season. There's also the phenomenon of the legislative season here in Texas, because we, as you know, we have a citizen legislature that meets 5 months every 2 years, and people oftentimes have the idea that that's when they say, how could it be that that our members can absorb that much information and do that much work in 5 months? Well, the answer, of course, is that they don't. They're actually working all the time. And for people of faith really to be effectively involved in the political process, they need to be working all the time too. One of the ways that they need to most be working is to be establishing relationships with their elected officials when it's not the crunch, when it's not right before the election, and it's not right when the legislative session is going on and they really are overwhelmed by all the work that they have to do and all the 2,000 plus bills that they have to go through. We have this phenomenon, the interim period from when the legislature ends in 1 year until the next time it comes back. That's the work period for people of faith and people who are not necessarily coming at it from a faith perspective but are just interested citizens as far as that goes. That's when they need to be taking the time to go meet with those members of the legislature and say, I'm your constituent, I live in your neighborhood, if it's your representative, because you really do. They live right by you. Maybe your kids go to the same school. Now is the time for you to say, here are my interests, and I want to make sure you know that I'm here, I'm watching you, and I want to participate.
We still need to do Chuck.
Sandy, as I saw that, I was recalling that since 1988, when Austin Faith Dialogue first started, almost every other year when the legislature meets, we've had a Texas Impact spokesperson. This is the fourth, if not the fifth, show that we've done on this topic, because it's the one interfaith group that speaks in behalf of the human services, non-denominationally, ecumenically, on an interfaith basis. So thank you for doing that again this year.
You're quite welcome. It was actually my treat. I do the shows that I do because I'm particularly interested in the topic, or it's timely, or whatever. And I hope, motivated all of us to stay involved in the political process, to act out our faith. And who knew that her words would be so prescient, since then we ended up paying attention to the political process for weeks this fall.
Okay, so that touches one of our main purposes, which is social issues, and you have this other one you said dealt more with the arts.
Right. I don't do shows focused on the arts very often, but I do enjoy them when I get a chance. So this particular show, the second clip, focuses on La Pastorela. It's the shepherd's story. One of, I think, Austin's little-known cultural treasures. This particular play is a look at the story of the shepherd and everyone on the way to Bethlehem, the story of good and evil because the archangel Michael and the devil fight it out. Townspeople are involved, lots of singing, dancing, contemporary comments on the Austin scene. La Pastorela is really just a marvelous cultural treasure.
When did this air?
This aired just this fall because La Pastorela is performed at the Center for Mexican American Cultural Studies right before the Christmas holiday.
All right.
So it's a relatively recent show, and I talked with the director, and two of the performers were guests. The young woman playing Archangel Michael and the other young woman playing the devil.
Okay, well, I think we'll be ready to look at that right now.
I would guess that unfortunately not many people yet know this shepherd story. So tell us, at least in broad outline, what is the plot of La Pastorela?
Okay, La Pastorela is a story that takes place on the night that Jesus is born. And there is a group of shepherds tending their sheep out in the fields. They're quite a distance from Bethlehem, and they lay down to sleep. And during the night, one of the shepherds, in our case, Gila, a young woman, has a dream. And in her dream, St. Michael, the archangel, appears to her. And what we do, we always have St. Michael played by a woman. And one of the actor that's playing that part will be here with us today. But she appears to the shepherd and tells her there's this miracle in Bethlehem, and you need to tell the other shepherds, and all of you should go pay homage to the newborn king. So she goes back to sleep, and in the morning she wakes up and tells the shepherds, we have to go on this journey. In the meantime, the devil gets wind of what's going on and decides that he has to stop the shepherds from getting to Bethlehem. That's more converts, to the new king. So if he can at least stop them from getting there, he can have an effect on things. And so they proceed to make the journey, and on the way, the devil keeps sending first other devils to try to stop them from getting there. And St. Michael is watching from heaven and also sends angels to help the shepherds get there. And then finally, they get to the part where the main devil, Luzbel, decides he has to go down himself because his other devils haven't been able to accomplish the task. So St. Michael decides, well, I better go down also. And then so they battle it out over the shepherds. And of course, St. Michael wins and then guides the shepherds the last part of the journey to Bethlehem.
Okay, well, we've had several of these programs this year dealing with festivities in town, and including in the Hispanic community, and that was one of them that I hadn't heard about. So I appreciate your doing that, Sandy.
Absolutely. I think the show should show a broad spectrum of what's going on in the religious community in Austin.
Mm-hmm. One of the people that is, of course, been a host of Austin Faith Dialogue that was supposed to be with us tonight, that has helped show the spectrum over the years since we started airing in 1988, right. Carl Grunberg of
right.
Gethsemane Lutheran Church. And he was supposed to be sitting right here, and then at the very last minute he said he was ill, and we miss him, not only for the show tonight, but to be able to express our appreciation to him for what he's done this past year as well as in earlier years.
Right, some other really creative shows.
And I'd like to just highlight a few of these. One that came along just within the last week or two was in the Christmas season, about the Children's Museum here in town, mm-hmm. that highlighted a variety of Christmas customs around the world. And he brought some young folks into that. And of course, the Swedish holidays were a part of that, and Carl, being of that extraction, made sure that got it in. We also enjoyed his show on Houston Tillotson, and the new president that mm-hmm. came on board this fall, and he interviewed him soon after his arrival, so that was helpful for the whole community. We were glad to see that Carl had shows about military chaplaincy. I don't think we'd ever done that in our 13 years on the air, and he is a person that continues to be a pastor in the community and does this as an expression of his ministry. So we want to say, if you're looking in, Carl, thank you very much, and we hope you get well soon.
And of course, before we close tonight, we do want to give serious acknowledgement to Chuck Meyer, who did just a few shows with us, but did some really creative ones, since he was so well known for his death and dying work in the community.
Right.
We have at least one clip we'll have time to show of his tonight, and that's a show called Good Grief.
Right.
Sounds like a contradiction, but for Chuck, that never was.
Let's take a look at it and then have some closing thoughts about that.
Right.
Well, in terms of, particularly in terms of death, how do people know when to come for help, and who do they go to?
Oh, well, death is one of those sort of times when change can be literally reconstitutive for an individual or for a family. And I usually think that when people feel that they don't know who to ask particularly, or the ordinary ways they go for information or for advice to a friend or someone else, might not be what they need. Say if they need to ask questions that they'd feel exposed a bit about, if they'd feel like they're vulnerable and they don't quite know the answers to things and they'd like to talk to someone with anonymity, they could do that. Sometimes, though, people can go to persons who share their values, like their pastor, rabbi, or priest. Sometimes a very good friend can exactly be what they need.
Well, how do people know when? I mean, I talked to a lot of people that are either...
Well, we have to say that, of course, we did this special show on Chuck after his death. But just one other acknowledgement that he was a gift to the whole community, and he volunteered to be a host on this show with us. He was bringing that enrichment with him. And so, once again, let's all feel that thanksgiving for his spirit.
Absolutely. And Thanksgiving for all the people who say yes to us and who come on the show to talk about their program, their ministry, their emphasis, their passion, whatever. It has not ever been difficult for me to find folks who want to come and share.
Right.
Thus, such a great diversity of programs this year and all the years we've done the show.
So, Sandy, let me just ask one final question of you and your reflections about this year and the several years that you've been on it. I want to say thank you for that, and I think we both need to say thank you to KNVA.
Yes, we do. They are gracious to us every week, and we couldn't do it without them.
And when we come back in the new year, we've got shows planned for the year 2001 into the first quarter, and we're always glad for feedback. And Sandy, we look forward to continuing to work together.
That's right. And we'll see you on Austin Faith Dialogue next year.